Hello, my name is Ruairi, WWX developer at Finsweet, and in this video we're going to be taking a dive into page speed for websites, specifically page speeds for websites built in Webflow. We're going to be looking at the basics of page speed, the different tools that are available for testing it. We'll then look further into the technical aspects behind page speed, as well as how we can improve it from a non-technical perspective, looking at our content. And lastly, we're going to look at the importance of educating clients on page speed and what to expect when testing their own websites. Let's dive into it.
Finsweet, agency, product, community. That's effing sweet.
So, 3 general page speed principles to think about here. The first is that page speed is not a mystery or a black box that you can't look into. It is a science, albeit sometimes a tricky one. If you've ever ran a page speed test, or multiple page speed tests, you'll be familiar with getting different page speed results each time you run a test. Usually not too different, but there can be differences. But the underlying principles of page speed and how we improve it are the same. Again, this can be tricky for people starting out. If you look at something like a page speed report and start, looking at things like serving legacy JavaScript and next-gen formats, render blocking resources, excessive DOM size, you might know what these things mean. You might not. If you don't worry. We're going to run through what a lot of these are. Doesn't have to be a mystery. The second, possibly the most important one, is that at the end of the day, page speed is about balancing content with speed and making trade-offs between the two of these. When we're using tools like Webflow, there's a lot of technical aspects of page speed that we don't have to worry about. So the hosting that Webflow is built on top of, AWS, Amazon Web Services, all of that is taken care of. There's a lot of the more technical stuff that we don't have to worry about. So generally, where the worry is going to be for us as web designers, web developers, is balancing these two things, content with speed. More content, less speed. The third one for the freelancers here, anyone involved in an agency or selling websites for other people, is the importance of educating clients about page speed. When I first started web development as a freelancer 7-8 years ago with WordPress, I launched a website for a local business, and it was maybe the 3rd or 4th website that I'd launched. And 2 days later, they rang me in a panic saying that their website wasn't showing up on Google, because I had never explained to them that it can take a couple of days for Google to find your website. Should have told them that in advance, had to calm them down. Everything was fine. Couple of days later, they rang again saying that they tested the page speed of their website. And I was, new to this. I'd never heard of clients looking this deeply into websites. And they were looking at the mobile score for the website. We'll get into how that's different from desktop in a bit, but that often gives a really low score. I think it was given like 30, 40 out of 100. Now the desktop one was fine. And if you actually visited the phone or the website on a phone, it loaded very quickly. But you do need to try and explain that, set expectations with clients in advance as to what their page speed is going to be. If it's a very, very basic landing page with a couple of images, you can expect a very high score. If they decide to fill it with, every tracking software that's out there, 3D spline animations, very large images, 100 YouTube videos, there's going to be a trade-off there. So once you educate your client on it, once they know a little bit about how this works and trust you in your guidance, things are going to go a lot more smoothly. So content. Content is generally going to be how we improve page speed, given that the technical infrastructure is, being abstracted away. Webflow is dealing with that for us. So more content, slower page speed. Depends on the kind of content, or the size of content rather, how much slower that page speed is going to be, what the decrease is going to be. But That's how it works. That's the bottom line for most things to do with page speed. So something to ask or for you to have a discussion about with your client is what is a must-have and what is a nice-to-have. A must-have being something that you cannot remove. So let's say, for example, PageSpeed test says that there is third-party code, JavaScript scripts that are slowing down the website. You'll very often see Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager in there. Majority of your clients are not going to want to remove that. So we had a client before who asked us, could we get the page speed any better? We couldn't really, because we'd done optimizing the images and reducing unnecessary content. So we said, here's page speed with all your tracking scripts, your huge amount of tracking scripts. And here's the page speed, a lot better with your tracking scripts removed. And we basically showed them the difference in removing the scripts. And they took a look and said, we'll keep the tracking scripts because they're more important. And they learned, we explained to them that this is a trade-off and it's just about thinking about the options and weighing them up. So what is your client prepared to sacrifice to improve page speed? Now, there will be other ways you can optimize and improve the page speed without having to remove content, but this is often a very big piece of the pie. As an example, we're going to look at a website here. Let's hop over to it in Chrome. By Berkshire Hathaway. If you're not familiar with this company, you might be familiar with, I think, the founder and CEO or the owner, Warren Buffett. This is a huge company in America. It's a holding company, investment company. It owns stakes in huge companies all around the world. And this is what their website looks like. Very plain, very basic, probably typed together in a text editor. I don't think there's even, there is an image down here. Okay, the logo is text. There's maybe one image down here. This website gets a very high page speed score because there's very little on it. This is an extension for Chrome called Lighthouse, and it uses a tool called PageSpeed Insights by Google. And what this does is you open the extension over here while you're on the website, and it's going to run a report. It's going to tell you the date and the time, the URL, and you can share these links with other people to show them the report. Mobile and desktop, we're going to come back to in a minute. We want to look at these two panels here, Core Web Vitals and Performance Issues. Core Web Vitals is what we call, if we go back over to Figma, field data or real user monitoring. This is information that Google and Chrome has collected on certain users if they have that kind of tracking enabled. And it's real world data as to how fast your website is loading. So these are averages. If you try this on a new website, you'll get a message along the lines of not available or not enough data, something along the lines of that, because this data comes from users. Lab data or synthetic testing is this extension running its own test on the website, the Berkshire Hathaway website in this case. This is the company that owns a chunk of Coca-Cola. Their website looks like this because they're so full of money, they don't need a nice website. So when this extension runs a test, simulates a test, it's going to break it down into 4 areas: performance, accessibility, best practices, and SEO. We're just interested in performance. So it's giving it a score out of 100. A couple of other metrics down here. Largest contentful paint is how long it takes the website to load the biggest thing, whatever the kind of thing that takes up the most space on the viewport. First contentful paint is how long it takes for that to start painting. Blocking time is how much time is spent processing third-party code like JavaScript. Cumulative layout shift is how much the website moves when it's loading. So you'll sometimes see on older or poorly put together websites that as it's loading, the structure of the page can change and kind of move around. Things can resize. So we want to keep that down at 0. And then speed index is how long it takes to load the page. And we can see those up here as well. Time to first byte is how long it takes the user's browser to go to a server, get a request, and start getting data back. This is the kind of thing that we don't need to worry about. If there was a problem on Webflow's end with hosting for some reason, that number would likely increase. So that's an example of one that's outside of our control. Let's go over to Apple. So as we can very clearly see, there is a significant difference in these two websites. Apple is coming in at a performance score of 80. And these numbers were, so we got 1.9, 1.6 for those two. And over here we have 0.5 and 0.5. So PageSpeed still considers this to be fast, to be in the green. If any of these go into orange, it considers the Core Web Vitals assessment failed. So, this extension is happy with how Apple's doing, but it is slower. So that's, 0.5 to 2 seconds. That other website is 4 times faster. But more than likely, you are never going to build a website for a client that looks like this. You're all excellent web developers here. You're going to be putting out stuff that looks like this an awful lot quicker. So this is what I mean by trade-offs. And if you're ever, struggling to get this across to a client, if, the client wants the best of both worlds, they want a website like Apple's, and they want to get 100 here, and they want to cut this number down 4 times from 2 seconds to 5, show them this example. Show them these two sites, compare the numbers, and they will probably get the idea then. Another testing tool that you'll often come across is GTmetrix. Now, I think recently they've reduced how many speed tests you can do without paying, but they have some handy things like letting you pick the country that you run the test from, the device, the browser, that kind of thing. You'll see that this is very similar. We have, that blocking time, cumulative layout shift, largest contextual paint. I quite like that they give you this speed visualization diagram where you can see takes, 90 milliseconds to hit the server. Everything is loaded in 300 milliseconds, 0.3 of a second. Apple, on the other hand, we can see that it is just doing the first contentful paint. It is just starting to paint or render out the page well after the Berkshire Hathaway website has completely finished loading. So this is, again, a very good visual to show, a client that is having trouble understanding why they can't have a website like Apple's that loads super quick. Another useful number we can see here is the total size of the page. This is a very important number. If this number goes up to 10, all of these scores are going to start coming down. Again, over on Berkshire Hathaway, we can see that or it might not tell me. Over here, sorry. Also says it over here. Less than 200 kilobytes, very small. And it'll also break down what that is. So, 98% of that is JavaScript, and then there's a tiny sliver of HTML, images, and other. On Apple's, as you'd expect, or as I've come to expect, images are often something that take up a lot of the size of the page or make up a huge portion of how large a page is. Fonts, that is, again, a little on the big size. I think they probably have different fonts that they're using. And then their JavaScript. This is a basic overview of how these work. You can break it down further by going into the performance tab here. The structure tab will give you advice on how to improve the structure. Waterfall, again, getting a bit more in-depth here, but if you've ever seen the network tab of the inspector in your browser where you can see everything that's being requested, loaded into the website, this is going to show you, again, what's loading in and where, and what is taking up the most amount of time to render on to the page. So they're two very useful tools, GTmetrix and PageSpeed Insight. Something to consider is the need to run multiple tests. The Core Web Vitals, you don't need to worry about multiple tests because this is aggregated data of how quickly the website is actually loading for people. these performance tests you will see change a little bit, not too much, but they will change sometimes. So I'd often run maybe 3 tests and just get the average number. Okay, so before we get into optimizing, talk very quickly about these 2 options here. This mobile tab has caused a lot of web developers a lot of hassle with their clients because it always shows a lower number for performance and often significantly lower. So for Apple, this is 80 down to 42, nearly half in the score. This is something that a lot of people's clients have seen and have gotten worried about. We'll go into why in a moment. 100 score for the Berkshire Hathaway website, this one here, on page speed. Desktop, mobile is 91, not super low. Again, most clients would be very happy to see that. The thing is, you do not often see that number. So if this is a 91 for this kind of website that's 300 kilobytes, how on earth are you meant to get a website like this to get to that score? The key here, the secret to why this happens, is when we're in mobile and we go down here, we get some useful information about this particular test that we're running. We can see when it was captured, and we can see 2 very important things here. These tell us the device that is being emulated to test the speed, and if anything is being done to throttle or change the internet speed. So over on desktop, we're emulating a desktop that is for some reason being slowed down by a certain amount, not sure why. And custom throttling, so there's an internet connection with a ping of 40 ms, so it takes 40 milliseconds to ping a server and back, and 10 megs a second download speed. So that's quite fast. Desktop is being emulated on a Moto G Power, which is some sort of Motorola phone that's maybe in the $200 price range. Being slowed down, the CPU is being throttled, and it's on a throttled internet connection that is downloading 1.5 meg a second, and that has a 150 millisecond ping, which would be considered quite high. If it's that high, you start running into issues. If you're a gamer, you'll be familiar with that number, spoiling your gaming session. What's happening here is it's being tested on a slow device with a slow internet speed. If we go and look at the page speed here for Apple, it's getting 42, and it's saying that it takes 3 seconds to start painting the screen, to start rendering the content. And for the largest contentful paint, so that'll be to fully load this top section here with that lovely iPad Pro image, is taking 18 seconds. I guarantee you that is not the case for 99.9% of people that will visit the Apple website. It is not that slow. After this session, go onto your phone, load the Apple website. It is not this slow. It is not deserving of a 42 unless you are on a old, slow phone and have a really poor internet connection, in which case, at least when that's ever the case for me, if I'm out in the countryside here in Ireland and there's poor internet, you just put your phone away because you can't load websites. If it's taking 18 seconds to load the Apple website, you are not watching videos or browsing websites on your phone. So I quite frankly ignored this. I don't pay any heed to it. I have sometimes let clients know about this in advance. If back in my freelance work, if I knew they had an interest in page speed, and if it ever came up, I basically just had to go down and show them this. And once maybe ever I have used this Apple website as an example and had someone test it on their phone, a client, and see that, it wasn't actually that slow. So to wrap that up, be aware of why this always gives you a low score, and you can explain that to your clients. So optimizing. There's a couple of things we can do to optimize the content on our website. First is optimizing images before we upload them. So if you've ever been sent content by a client, or often a photographer, with the full resolution image that they've taken on, like a big expensive DSLR camera, the size of those images can be anywhere from 3 meg to 10 meg or more, which for reference, if we go back to Apple's site and go over to summary, you can take one photo on a camera that is bigger than the entire Apple website. So resize them. There are tools to do this online. If you have a Mac, you can do this in the preview application. You can go up to tools and size. Generally, it's going to be somewhere in the 1920 range for the width. If it's, a full width photo that has to go in a background or something like that, size them to whatever size you think they're going to be needed at. And sometimes you can export them at a lower quality. So sometimes you'll be putting together graphics in something like Photoshop. You size it correctly. It's, a megabyte. You drop the percentage quality for, if it's a JPEG from 100 to 80 or something like that. Often when you drop the quality that much, you're not going to be able to see it. You have to drop it quite a bit to get a noticeable decrease in the size. So you can play around with what is the quality or the resolution that you're exporting images at. Inside of Webflow, you have the option, and have had for a while, to convert images to the WebP format. That's a modern image format that I believe is created by Google and is typically, I got these stats this morning, 25 to 34% smaller than comparable JPEG images. So inside of Webflow, I don't think this project has any images. Let's drag one in. Oh. You're basically going to get the option when you select your photos to compress them. You can do a bulk select and you can compress all of your images at the same time. Only issue with that is you can often have non-compressible formats in here. So, if you had 100 photos in here and one SVG file and you do select all, that compress button is going to get grayed out. And you have to go, and I've had to do this, you've got to go and find that SVG file and untick it. And then you can bulk compress your 99 or your 100 images. So another reason to upload them beforehand. So pretty simple, compress button up here. Select the images you want to compress. I'll check. I believe this is lossless compression. So you have two types of compression when it comes to compressing images or reducing the quality. You have lossless, which is a way of compressing it without reducing the quality, which gets you so far. And then you have lossy compression, which compresses and does result in a loss in quality. I'm not sure which of these Webflow uses, but in any case, I haven't noticed drop in the quality. So, item 3, reducing unneeded third-party scripts. That's the example of things like Hotjar, Google Analytics, Finsweet attributes is a third-party script. But again, unneeded. Generally, you're not going to have many unneeded scripts if you're adding them in carefully. If you're just throwing in scripts because they look cool, you may end up with some unneeded ones. More commonly is if you take over a web project that has been poorly built or poorly put together, you may well find that there is unneeded third-party scripts that can be removed. Enable minifying in Webflow settings. So if we go over to the settings of our website and publishing, I believe, down to the bottom, we have options here to minify HTML. As it points out, it makes your code harder to read because it is doing everything it can to reduce the size of the HTML without actually changing it. Same for the CSS and JavaScript. I don't have the CSS one on just because this is a playground or staging website for me. But for sites that are going live into production, good step to turn those on. Likely won't see a massive difference, but there should be some. And the bigger your site is, the more HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, the more likely this is to be beneficial. Enable lazy load. This is an option you have likely seen in Webflow. So if we click an image, again, this is just a testing ground for me. I just have an image container here that doesn't even have an image in it. But if I zoom out, we will see, Webflow doesn't like me being zoomed in. We'll see an option down here for type. And this is the way that the image loads in. What lazy load means is, let's take the Apple website as an example and scroll down to the photo here of the lady with the Vision Pro. When the website first loads in, any images that are below the folds, i.e. outside of the viewport that you have to scroll down the page to see, won't be loaded in until before the user gets to them. And Apple more than likely have this turned on for everything on the site. It works very smoothly so that you don't, scroll down and then have an image load in. But what this does is it lets everything else load in first and then gets to the images as you scroll down the page. Other options there, Eager loads with the page, so it just loads at the outset. Auto defaults to browser, so I believe there's browser extensions or settings that let you dictate this. Not too sure on the use cases for that, but generally lazy is the best option here, and I believe that's what the default is inside of Webflow. Pissable, possible. Async or defer scripts where possible. So this might be something you've come across, it might not be. When you have a script for JavaScript, so if we go to the custom code here, you can type in async or defer. And that changes the way that the script loads. And I'm hopefully going to get the definitions for these right. If you don't have any of those tags, the script is going to load fully as the browser works its way down the DOM. It's going to load it fully. Async means that while the rest of the page is loading, all the HTML and the rest of the CSS and JavaScript, script gets loaded at the same time. And defer means that it is deferred or moved towards the end of rendering the page. So it'll be done after everything else on the page has loaded in. So use cases for these. Need to be careful when you use these. If you defer Google Analytics, then if someone comes onto the website for, say, half a second and it takes a second for the website to load, the tracking code isn't going to fire and it's going to miss that user, which is important for some metrics like the bounce rate, which is how quickly someone leaves the page, content that you need to load in quickly from external places. You need to be careful with where you use that. Async, I believe, is suitable for most tracking scripts to load those at the same time. An example of somewhere that we wouldn't use async or defer is for Wiz. So if you might have used Wiz, you might not. Our tool for building web apps in Webflow with a backend like Xano or Supabase, that sort of thing. This needs to load in its entirety as quickly as possible because this tool actively changes the DOM, the document object model, which is a fancy way of saying the page, the web page, and all the content. So we do not want to async this and we do not want to defer it. We need this to load as quickly as possible because we'll have built a bunch of logic in Wiz about how data is loaded into the page, how the Webflow DOM changes, making things appear, disappear. So I have made the mistake in the past when I was a new freelancer of just throwing those tags onto JavaScript. Client was giving out about the page speed. I didn't understand all of this stuff that I've just gone through with all of you and, didn't realize that actually the website speed was fine. It's very good, actually. And I threw those onto a couple of scripts that I shouldn't have and caused some small problems with tracking codes and things not loading properly and had to go back and check over it. But that's just one to be careful of. Don't end up in a panic and throw those on. Look up where and when to use those tags. So, nearly at the end here, folks. A couple of things about Webflow. It's already optimized for speed. It is the way in which you, the developer, put together your site and link in scripts and optimize or not optimize images from the client that are generally going to affect the speed. Webflow outputs clean, minimal semantic code. Their servers are very fast. They run on AWS, Amazon Web Services, and they use Fastly CDN. And CDN is a content delivery network. And you can learn more about this on Fastly's website, but the example I like to use is Cloudflare, because Cloudflare have a little map here showing all the locations. Oh, go away, Cloudflare Assistant. I'd rather not. Thank you. This is a map of all the data centers that Cloudflare have for their CDN, their content delivery network. And Fastly works in the exact same way. If you build your website and host it in North America, there is going to be a copy of it loaded onto their server, their CDN in Dublin here in Ireland, or in London across the pond. And that means that anyone in London or England or the UK is going to get served the content from a server in England, and the same for anybody in Ireland. And if you want to really get into this, you can go to speed.cloudflare.com and it'll tell me how long it takes to ping the server over in London and get it back. The answer is very quick, 25 milliseconds. So that's 0.025 of a second. It wouldn't be too bad if my browser had to go all the way to America and get the data back. But this does make a difference, and it's part of the reason Webflow sites load so quickly. Lastly, clients. Explain the basics of page speed to them. If they want to go in more depth, if they are very concerned about page speed, you may have to go a little bit more in depth. The Berkshire Hathaway Apple example is very handy. Chat with them if there is a problem with page speed, if it is noticeably slow or they're not happy with it and you've done everything you can to optimize. Discuss with them what trade-offs between content and speed they're happy to make, and tell them to chill out when it comes to the mobile page speed score. And that brings us to the end of page speed in Webflow. Thank you very much for watching. This is definitely not the end of learning about this. There is a lot more to explore, but hopefully this has given you a good overview of page speed, how to test it, how to work with the technical side of things, the content side of things, and how to tell your clients what to expect when doing page speed tests. As always, your feedback and input is very important to us here at Finsweet, so please let us know in the comments how you found this video, anything that could be improved, anything that we missed or should cover next time, and any suggestions you have for future Finsweet Plus sessions or Finsweet YouTube videos that you'd like to see to help bring you to success with Webflow. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.